For me, Rio Bravo is comfort food. It makes me feel good every time I watch it. It's not a deep dish affair like The Searchers, which is American mythology writ large, nor is it an action-packed shoot 'em up, although there is some of that. This is Howard Hawks, rounding up a passel of people like the Duke, the Dude, and the Kid, just to show us what professionalism is all about. John Wayne is the sheriff of a small border town, who, along with his broken-down deputy, arrests the brother of Nathan Burnett, the local cattle baron. Claude Akins plays Joe Burnett, his thuggish younger brother who murders a man who tries to stop him from beating up on Dean Martin. Once he's arrested, his older brother hires a gang of no-account gunmen to harass the town and to force Wayne to cut his brother loose. So it's a siege movie, and it's up to the Duke to hold down the fort until the U.S. Marshal arrives. Dean Martin is Dude, John Wayne's drunken deputy who's publicly humiliated at the top of the film and who spends much of the movie wrestling with the DTs. He gives a fine, earnest performance that oddly foreshadows his later TV persona as the fun-loving drinker. Ricky Nelson, fresh from the hit TV series The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, plays Colorado, a young gunslinger who joins Wayne after his wagon master boss, played by Ward Bond, is gunned down by Burnett's men. John Russell, who had a brief stint in the TV series Lawman, plays Nathan Burnett. Russell also turns up in 1949's Yellow Sky, and much later in Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider. And then there's the great Angie Dickerson, who plays a lady gambler named Feathers. She's new in town, so of course Wayne wants her to leave on the next stage, but we know that's not going to happen. And that's a good thing too, because her comic teasing of Wayne is one of the absolute highlights of the film, and Wayne's befuddled exasperation is a lot of fun to watch. If all this sounds familiar, it's because Hawks remade his own film 7 years later and called it El Dorado. And John Carpenter used the basic plot for his film Assault on Precinct 13. In fact, my brother Sean prefers El Dorado. I think he had a mild crush on Michelle Carey. Can't say I blame him. And while I personally prefer Rio Bravo, El Dorado has one great thing going for it, and that's Robert Mitchum. Mitchum basically plays the same part that Dean Martin played in Rio Bravo, but instead of a drunken deputy, he's a drunken sheriff. And Mitchum is very funny in the part. And Ricky Nelson's Colorado is reworked with a young James Caan playing Mississippi. But Rio Bravo is the original. It's the McCoy. And speaking of McCoy, Walter Brennan of the real McCoys turns up as Stumpy, the crippled keeper of the jailhouse keys. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal, how when Wayne signed on for the film, he asked Hawks what the plot was. And Hawks said, "Oh, no plot, John, no plot, just character, just character." The screenplay by Jules Furthman and Lee Brackett allows Hawks and his cast to have a good time with the scenes they have to play, and that's what propels all of Hawks' films. And that feeling comes right off the screen and says, "Howdy." The movie is also beautifully lit by Russell Harlan, and the whole thing ends with a final confrontation between the good guys and the bad guys that delighted every tow-headed kid in the audience. Finally, this is one of those movies, along with Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, that for me represents the pinnacle of 50s Hollywood. I was 6 years old when these movies were released, but I didn't get to see them until a few years later when they popped up on television. And yet, it's because of these two movies that I can remember the feel of those years, the feel of those times. And yes, things were decidedly different back then. Not necessarily better, but definitely different. And speaking of good times, this movie even has a musical number. How could it not, with Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson in the cast? All the guys are sitting around the jailhouse one day and they decide to have a sing-along. Now, on first viewing, this may seem like a crass attempt on the part of the studio to manufacture a hit record out of the movie, and maybe it was, but it sure was a lot of fun. A young filmmaker I know was outraged by this sequence. How can they put this in the movie? It destroys the reality of the story. All I could do was shake my head and sigh, because for me, Rio Bravo is apple pie and chocolate cake all rolled into one. Good. See you around the campus.